Question 1. Comparative studies suggest that effective corporate communication during periods of operational challenge is crucial for maintaining investor confidence. Sonae is experiencing a significant, unforeseen disruption in its primary supply chain for a key product line, which is projected to impact quarterly earnings by approximately 15%. The head of investor relations is considering how to communicate this development. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and ethical best practices for Sonae? Option A. Wait until the end of the quarter to include the impact in the regular earnings report, framing it as an unforeseen operational challenge that has now been largely resolved. Option B. Immediately issue a press release detailing the supply chain disruption, its projected financial impact, and the steps Sonae is taking to mitigate the situation, while also preparing to address investor queries proactively. Option C. Focus solely on highlighting Sonae's long-term growth strategies and positive market outlook in all communications, effectively downplaying or ignoring the current supply chain issue. Option D. Issue a brief statement acknowledging minor operational adjustments, without specifying the nature or magnitude of the supply chain disruption or its financial implications. The correct answer is B. Immediately issue a press release detailing the supply chain disruption, its projected financial impact, and the steps Sonae is taking to mitigate the situation, while also preparing to address investor queries proactively. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for positive public perception and the ethical obligation to disclose material information accurately and transparently. Sonae, like any publicly traded entity, operates under strict regulatory frameworks designed to protect investors and maintain market integrity. The pressure to manage public image can tempt individuals to downplay or omit negative information, but this directly contravenes principles of fair disclosure and investor protection. Careful judgment is required to balance business interests with legal and ethical duties. The correct approach involves proactively and accurately disclosing the potential negative impact of the supply chain disruption to relevant stakeholders, including investors and regulatory bodies, in accordance with Sonae's disclosure obligations. This aligns with the principle of transparency and ensures that the market has access to material information for informed decision-making. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing listed companies, mandate timely and accurate disclosure of events that could materially affect the company's financial performance or share price. Acting ethically in this context means prioritizing investor protection and market fairness over short-term reputational management. An incorrect approach would be to delay or omit the disclosure of the supply chain disruption. This failure to disclose material information in a timely manner violates regulatory requirements for listed companies, which aim to prevent insider trading and ensure a level playing field for all investors. Such an omission can lead to significant penalties, reputational damage, and loss of investor confidence. Another incorrect approach would be to present the information in a misleadingly optimistic light, downplaying the severity of the disruption. This constitutes misrepresentation and is a direct breach of ethical conduct and regulatory mandates for accurate financial reporting. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a structured decision-making process. This involves identifying the relevant stakeholders, understanding the potential impact of the situation, and consulting the applicable regulatory framework and company policies. Prioritizing transparency and accuracy, even when it presents short-term challenges, is paramount. Seeking advice from legal and compliance departments is crucial to ensure adherence to all regulatory obligations and ethical standards. The ultimate goal is to act in a manner that upholds the integrity of the market and protects the interests of all stakeholders. Question 2. The efficiency study reveals that a particular Sonae department is consistently underperforming, impacting overall profitability. The department head suggests that the study's methodology might be flawed and proposes a revised analysis that would present the department in a more favorable light, potentially avoiding any immediate repercussions or mandatory restructuring. Option A. Implement immediate, drastic restructuring of the department based solely on the initial efficiency study, without further investigation or consultation. Option B. Disregard the efficiency study's findings entirely, as the department head has raised concerns about its methodology, and continue with current operational practices. Option C. Accept the department head's proposal to conduct a revised analysis that presents the department in a more favorable light, thereby avoiding immediate negative consequences. Option D. Acknowledge the study's findings, initiate a review of the department's processes, and develop a plan for improvement in consultation with the department head and relevant stakeholders, ensuring transparency throughout the process. The correct answer is D. Acknowledge the study's findings, initiate a review of the department's processes, and develop a plan for improvement in consultation with the department head and relevant stakeholders, ensuring transparency throughout the process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's desire for efficiency with ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet targets can lead to shortcuts that compromise integrity. Careful judgment is required to navigate the conflict between business objectives and responsible conduct. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to Sonae's internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. This means acknowledging the findings of the efficiency study, even if they are unfavorable, and taking appropriate action to address any identified issues. This approach is ethically sound because it upholds honesty and accountability. It is also regulatorily compliant, as it demonstrates a commitment to good corporate governance and avoids practices that could be construed as misleading or fraudulent. An incorrect approach would be to ignore or downplay the findings of the efficiency study to avoid negative consequences. This failure to address potential issues directly is ethically problematic, as it represents a lack of transparency and a disregard for the truth. Regulatorily, it could lead to non-compliance if the inefficiencies identified have implications for financial reporting, operational standards, or consumer protection. Another incorrect approach would be to manipulate the data or the study's conclusions to present a more favorable picture. This is a clear ethical breach, constituting dishonesty and potentially fraud. It would also violate regulatory requirements concerning accurate record-keeping and reporting, exposing Sonae to significant legal and reputational risks. A third incorrect approach would be to implement changes based solely on the efficiency study without considering the broader ethical and regulatory implications, such as potential impacts on employee well-being or customer service. This demonstrates a narrow focus that overlooks the interconnectedness of business operations and ethical responsibilities. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of Sonae's code of conduct and relevant regulations. It requires critical evaluation of all available information, including efficiency studies, and consideration of potential ethical and regulatory ramifications of different courses of action. Professionals should seek guidance from legal or compliance departments when faced with complex dilemmas, and always err on the side of caution and integrity. Question 3. Regulatory review indicates that a Sonae employee has observed a colleague, who is also a close personal friend, engaging in behavior that appears to contravene Sonae's policy on the appropriate use of company resources. The employee is unsure how to proceed, given the personal relationship. Option A. Directly confront the friend about their behavior and suggest they correct it. Option B. Report the observed behavior discreetly to Sonae's Human Resources Department for investigation. Option C. Ignore the behavior to avoid conflict with the friend and maintain the personal relationship. Option D. Discuss the observed behavior with other colleagues to gauge their opinions before deciding on a course of action. Correct answer is B. Report the observed behavior discreetly to Sonae's Human Resources Department for investigation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it places an employee in a position where personal relationships could conflict with professional integrity and Sonae's ethical standards. The core challenge lies in balancing loyalty to a colleague with the obligation to uphold Sonae's policies and regulatory compliance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any action taken is fair, transparent, and does not create an appearance of impropriety. The correct approach involves discreetly reporting the situation to the appropriate internal department, such as human resources or legal, without directly confronting the colleague or attempting to resolve the issue independently. This is the best professional practice because it adheres to Sonae's established procedures for handling potential policy violations and ethical breaches. By escalating the matter through the designated channels, the employee ensures that the situation is investigated impartially and in accordance with Sonae's internal guidelines and any relevant regulatory frameworks that govern employee conduct and fair treatment. This process protects both the company and the individuals involved by ensuring a structured and documented resolution. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the situation. This is professionally unacceptable because it constitutes a failure to uphold Sonae's ethical code and potentially allows a violation of company policy to persist, which could have broader implications for team morale and operational integrity. Another incorrect approach would be to directly confront the colleague and attempt to resolve the matter informally. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses Sonae's established reporting mechanisms, potentially leading to an incomplete or biased investigation. It also exposes the employee to personal risk and could create an adversarial relationship, undermining team cohesion. Furthermore, it may not adequately address any underlying regulatory concerns. A third incorrect approach would be to discuss the situation with other colleagues before reporting it. This is professionally unacceptable as it constitutes gossip and breaches confidentiality. It can create a toxic work environment, damage reputations, and prejudice any subsequent investigation by introducing external opinions and biases. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the potential ethical or policy conflict. 2. Consulting Sonae's internal policies and code of conduct. 3. Determining the appropriate reporting channel as outlined by Sonae. 4. Acting in a manner that is discreet, objective, and aligned with company procedures. 5. Avoiding personal involvement in the investigation or judgment of the situation. Question 4. Consider a scenario where Sonae discovers a significant operational issue that is likely to have a material adverse effect on its quarterly earnings. The discovery occurs just days before the scheduled release of its financial results. The investor relations team is concerned that disclosing this issue now will lead to a sharp decline in Sonae's share price and negatively impact the company's reputation. They suggest waiting until after the results are released to disclose the issue, framing it as an unforeseen development that emerged shortly after the reporting period closed. What is the most appropriate course of action for Sonae in this situation? Option A. Downplay the severity of the operational issue in internal discussions and prepare a press release that minimizes its financial implications before making any public disclosure. Option B. Proceed with the scheduled release of financial results without mentioning the operational issue, and then disclose the issue in a subsequent announcement, framing it as a post-reporting period event. Option C. Inform only the board of directors and key senior management about the operational issue and its potential impact, and decide on a disclosure strategy internally before communicating externally. Option D. Immediately disclose the operational issue and its potential impact on earnings to the relevant regulatory authorities and the public, regardless of the timing relative to the scheduled financial results release. Correct answer is D. Immediately disclose the operational issue and its potential impact on earnings to the relevant regulatory authorities and the public, regardless of the timing relative to the scheduled financial results release. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for positive public perception and the ethical obligation to disclose material information accurately and without delay. Sonae, like any publicly traded entity, operates under a strict regulatory framework designed to ensure market integrity and protect investors. Misrepresenting or withholding information, even with the intention of managing public sentiment, can lead to severe consequences, including regulatory sanctions, reputational damage, and loss of investor confidence. The core of the dilemma lies in balancing commercial interests with legal and ethical duties. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the material information to the relevant regulatory bodies and the public. This aligns with the principles of market fairness and investor protection, which are paramount in financial regulation. Specifically, regulations typically mandate that companies promptly disclose any information that could reasonably be expected to have a material effect on the price of their securities. By choosing to delay or downplay the information, Sonae would be violating these disclosure obligations. This approach prioritizes integrity and compliance, fostering trust with stakeholders. An incorrect approach would be to attempt to spin the negative news or delay its release until a more opportune moment. This constitutes a failure to comply with disclosure requirements, which often have specific timelines for reporting material events. Such actions can be interpreted as market manipulation or insider trading if individuals with knowledge of the undisclosed information trade on it. Furthermore, attempting to conceal or misrepresent facts erodes trust and can lead to greater penalties when the truth eventually emerges. Another incorrect approach would be to only disclose the information internally to senior management without a clear plan for external communication. This creates an information asymmetry and fails to meet the company's obligations to the broader market and its shareholders. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. This involves 1. Identifying the material nature of the information and its potential impact. 2. Consulting the relevant regulatory framework and legal counsel to understand specific disclosure obligations and timelines. 3. Prioritizing transparency and accuracy in all communications. 4. Developing a clear and consistent communication strategy that addresses the information directly and honestly. 5. Ensuring all disclosures are made in a timely manner to the appropriate authorities and the public. Question 5. Benchmark analysis indicates that Sonae's internal research team has identified a significant operational inefficiency that, if publicly disclosed, is likely to negatively impact the company's quarterly earnings and potentially its stock price. The head of investor relations is concerned about the immediate market reaction and suggests delaying the announcement until a more favorable market condition or until a solution can be presented alongside the negative news. What is the most appropriate course of action for Sonae's head of investor relations? Option A. Immediately disclose the findings of the operational inefficiency to the market, as required by regulations, regardless of the potential short-term negative impact. Option B. Downplay the significance of the operational inefficiency in the public announcement and focus on other positive aspects of the company's performance. Option C. Delay the disclosure of the operational inefficiency until a comprehensive solution is developed and can be presented alongside the negative news to mitigate market concerns. Option D. Inform only a select group of key institutional investors about the operational inefficiency before the general public announcement to gauge their reaction. The correct answer is A. Immediately disclose the findings of the operational inefficiency to the market, as required by regulations, regardless of the potential short-term negative impact. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for positive public perception and the ethical obligation to disclose material information accurately and promptly. Sonae, like any publicly traded entity, operates under a regulatory framework that mandates transparency and fairness in its communications with investors and the market. The pressure to manage public image can tempt individuals to delay or selectively present information, which can lead to market manipulation or misleading stakeholders. The correct approach involves prioritizing full and timely disclosure of the material information, even if it might have a short-term negative impact on Sonae's stock price or public perception. This aligns with the principles of market integrity and investor protection, which are fundamental to regulatory compliance. Specifically, regulations governing listed companies typically require the immediate disclosure of any inside information that could significantly influence the price of securities. By adhering to this, Sonae upholds its duty of care to shareholders and the broader investment community, fostering trust and maintaining a level playing field. An incorrect approach would be to withhold or delay the disclosure of the negative findings. This action would constitute a breach of regulatory obligations, potentially leading to investigations, fines, and reputational damage. It also creates an unfair advantage for those who might be privy to the information before it is made public, violating principles of market fairness. Furthermore, attempting to spin the information or present it in an overly positive light without full disclosure would be considered misleading and a violation of ethical conduct, undermining Sonae's credibility. Another incorrect approach would be to only disclose the information to a select group of individuals, which would be insider trading and a severe breach of trust and law. Professionals facing such dilemmas should employ a structured decision-making process. This involves identifying the core ethical and regulatory obligations, assessing the potential impact of different courses of action on all stakeholders, and consulting relevant internal policies and external legal/compliance advice. The guiding principle should always be adherence to the spirit and letter of the law and ethical codes, even when faced with commercial pressures. Question 6. The investigation demonstrates that a Sonae employee, in a recent supplier negotiation, may have accepted a small, non-monetary gift that could be perceived as exceeding the acceptable limits outlined in Sonae's Code of Conduct, although no direct financial benefit was gained by the employee or Sonae. The employee's manager is aware of the situation but has not formally reported it, believing it to be insignificant. What is the most appropriate course of action for Sonae's compliance department? Option A. Immediately issue a formal warning to the employee for a policy violation, regardless of the gift's value or intent. Option B. Overlook the incident as the gift was non-monetary and of low value and no direct financial benefit was obtained. Option C. Initiate a formal review of the incident to determine if Sonae's Code of Conduct or any relevant regulations were breached, and take appropriate action based on the findings. Option D. Advise the manager to discreetly remind the employee about the gift policy without escalating the matter further. Correct answer is C. Initiate a formal review of the incident to determine if Sonae's Code of Conduct or any relevant regulations were breached, and take appropriate action based on the findings. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing Sonae's commitment to ethical conduct and compliance with potential pressure to overlook minor transgressions for the sake of expediency or maintaining a business relationship. The core ethical dilemma lies in deciding how to respond to information that suggests a potential breach of Sonae's internal policies and potentially regulatory guidelines, even if the impact appears minimal. Careful judgment is required to uphold Sonae's integrity and adhere to its established standards. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective investigation into the allegations, followed by appropriate action based on the findings. This upholds Sonae's commitment to ethical business practices and regulatory compliance. By initiating a formal review, Sonae demonstrates its dedication to transparency, accountability, and maintaining a culture of integrity. This proactive stance is crucial for preventing future issues and reinforcing trust with stakeholders. An incorrect approach of ignoring the allegations would be a failure to uphold Sonae's ethical standards and potentially regulatory obligations. This inaction could be interpreted as condoning unethical behavior and could lead to more significant problems down the line, including reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny. Another incorrect approach of immediately confronting the employee without a proper investigation risks prejudging the situation and could lead to unfair disciplinary action or damage to employee morale. It bypasses the necessary due diligence required in such matters. A further incorrect approach of downplaying the significance of the allegations without proper assessment fails to acknowledge the potential for even minor breaches to escalate or indicate systemic issues. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to robust compliance and ethical oversight. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with gathering all relevant facts objectively. This involves understanding the nature of the alleged breach, its potential impact, and any applicable Sonae policies or regulatory requirements. Following fact-finding, a decision should be made on the appropriate course of action, which may include further investigation, consultation with relevant departments, e.g., legal, compliance, and implementing corrective measures if necessary. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are fair, consistent, and aligned with Sonae's values and legal obligations. Question 7. The analysis reveals that Sonae is in the process of finalizing its annual financial results. Preliminary, unaudited figures indicate a significant deviation from market expectations, both positive and negative. Sonae's management is considering how to best communicate this development to the market while ensuring full regulatory compliance. Which of the following approaches best aligns with Sonae's regulatory obligations and professional conduct? Option A. Delay any public announcement regarding the financial results until the audited financial statements are fully completed and approved by the board, regardless of the preliminary findings. Option B. Share the preliminary figures only with select institutional investors who have a history of significant investment in Sonae. Option C. Conduct a thorough internal review of the preliminary figures with legal and compliance teams to verify accuracy and completeness before issuing a statement, potentially including a forecast of when audited results will be available. Option D. Immediately release the unaudited preliminary figures to the market to ensure timely disclosure, even if they are subject to change. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough internal review of the preliminary figures with legal and compliance teams to verify accuracy and completeness before issuing a statement, potentially including a forecast of when audited results will be available. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because Sonae, as a publicly listed company, must adhere to stringent regulatory frameworks governing its financial reporting and disclosures. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for timely and accurate information dissemination with the potential for market manipulation or insider trading. A professional must exercise careful judgment to ensure all disclosures are fair, complete, and not misleading, thereby protecting investor confidence and market integrity. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive review of all material information by Sonae's compliance and legal departments before any public announcement. This ensures that the information is accurate, consistent with previous disclosures, and complies with all relevant regulations, such as those pertaining to market abuse and financial reporting standards. This approach is ethically sound and legally mandated, as it prevents the premature or selective release of information that could disadvantage certain market participants or create an unfair advantage. An incorrect approach of immediately releasing unaudited preliminary figures without a thorough internal review poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. This could lead to the dissemination of inaccurate or incomplete information, potentially violating disclosure obligations and leading to market confusion or mispricing of Sonae's securities. Furthermore, if these preliminary figures are based on incomplete data or are subject to significant revision, their release could be construed as misleading the market. Another incorrect approach, which is to delay the announcement indefinitely until all internal audits are finalized, even if preliminary material information is available, is also professionally unacceptable. This can lead to a lack of transparency and may violate regulations requiring timely disclosure of material events. Investors rely on timely information to make informed decisions, and undue delays can erode trust and potentially lead to accusations of withholding crucial information. The professional reasoning framework for Sonae in such situations should involve a clear protocol for assessing the materiality of information, a robust internal review process involving legal and compliance, and a commitment to timely and transparent disclosure in accordance with regulatory requirements. This framework prioritizes accuracy, fairness, and compliance, ensuring that Sonae acts in the best interest of its shareholders and the broader market. Question 8. The performance metrics show a significant improvement in candidate engagement during the initial stages of the Sonae hiring assessment test. However, a deeper analysis reveals that this improvement is largely driven by a new, simplified introductory module that may not fully capture the critical thinking skills required for the role. Considering the regulatory framework governing hiring assessments, which approach best ensures compliance and ethical representation of Sonae's assessment process? Option A. Focus exclusively on the positive engagement metrics, emphasizing the overall success of the assessment in attracting candidates, and defer any discussion of the introductory module's limitations to internal review. Option B. Highlight the engagement metrics and attribute the improvement to a general enhancement of the assessment's appeal, without specifically mentioning the introductory module or its potential impact on critical thinking assessment. Option C. Report the engagement metrics as presented, without further elaboration or context, assuming that the overall assessment design is implicitly compliant. Option D. Present the improved engagement metrics prominently, highlighting the success of the new introductory module in capturing candidate interest, while also including a brief note about ongoing validation of its impact on critical thinking assessment. The correct answer is D. Present the improved engagement metrics prominently, highlighting the success of the new introductory module in capturing candidate interest, while also including a brief note about ongoing validation of its impact on critical thinking assessment. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the company's desire for positive performance representation with the absolute imperative of regulatory compliance and accurate disclosure. Misrepresenting performance metrics, even with the intention of presenting a favorable image, can lead to severe regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and loss of investor confidence. The core of the challenge lies in discerning the line between legitimate performance enhancement strategies and deceptive reporting. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the performance metrics against the established regulatory framework for Sonae's operations. This means ensuring that all reported figures are accurate, verifiable, and presented in a manner consistent with the Sonae Hiring Assessment Test's guidelines. Specifically, it requires understanding what constitutes a performance metric within the context of the assessment and adhering strictly to the rules governing its presentation. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant because it prioritizes truthfulness and transparency, which are fundamental tenets of fair assessment and market integrity. It aligns with the principle of providing a true and fair view of performance, as expected by regulatory bodies overseeing hiring assessments. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on highlighting positive trends without acknowledging any mitigating factors or potential negative indicators would be a failure of regulatory compliance. This is because it could create a misleading impression of performance, violating the spirit and letter of regulations that demand accurate and balanced reporting. Another incorrect approach, which involves selectively omitting data points that might detract from a positive narrative, is also a direct contravention of regulatory requirements for comprehensive and truthful disclosure. Such omissions can be interpreted as an attempt to manipulate perception, leading to regulatory scrutiny and potential sanctions. A third incorrect approach, which might involve using subjective interpretations or anecdotal evidence to bolster performance claims without grounding them in verifiable metrics, fails to meet the objective standards expected in a regulated hiring assessment. This lack of objective evidence undermines the credibility of the reported performance and exposes Sonae to regulatory censure for failing to adhere to established reporting standards. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the applicable regulatory framework. This involves identifying all relevant laws, guidelines, and internal policies. Next, they must critically evaluate the performance data, seeking to understand both the positive and negative aspects. The decision then involves determining how to present this data in a manner that is both compliant with regulations and ethically responsible, ensuring that no misleading impressions are created. This process requires a commitment to accuracy, transparency, and a proactive approach to identifying and mitigating any potential compliance risks. Question 9. To address the challenge of ensuring client data confidentiality within Sonae, an employee receives a request from a colleague for specific client details to assist with an ongoing project. The employee is unsure if the colleague has the necessary authorization or if the information is strictly required for the project's stated purpose. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Sonae employee to take? Option A. Share the information with the colleague, but add a note emphasizing that it is confidential and should not be further distributed. Option B. Proceed to share the information as requested, as collaboration is encouraged within Sonae to facilitate project completion. Option C. Seek explicit authorization from the client or the relevant Sonae management before sharing any information and confirm the necessity of the data for the project. Option D. Forward the requested client information to the colleague, assuming they have a legitimate need for it as they are also a Sonae employee. The correct answer is C. Seek explicit authorization from the client or the relevant Sonae management before sharing any information and confirm the necessity of the data for the project. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Sonae employee regarding the handling of potentially sensitive client information. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to provide efficient service with the strict regulatory requirements for data privacy and confidentiality. Mismanagement of such information can lead to significant reputational damage for Sonae, regulatory penalties, and a breach of client trust. Careful judgment is required to ensure all actions align with Sonae's internal policies and relevant legal frameworks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to Sonae's established data handling protocols and seeking explicit authorization before sharing any client information. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, fundamental to data protection regulations. By confirming the necessity of the information transfer and obtaining documented consent, the employee demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical data stewardship. This proactive measure safeguards client privacy and protects Sonae from potential breaches. Incorrect approach is analysis. Sharing the information without explicit confirmation of necessity or authorization, even with a colleague, represents a failure to adhere to data protection principles. This could be a violation of Sonae's internal policies and potentially broader data privacy laws, as it bypasses established control mechanisms designed to prevent unauthorized access or disclosure. Assuming the colleague has a legitimate need without verification is also a regulatory failure. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting sensitive data. Professional responsibility dictates that one must actively ensure data is only accessed by authorized individuals for legitimate purposes, rather than making assumptions. Forwarding the information without considering the sensitivity or the recipient's authorization level is a direct contravention of data privacy best practices. It suggests a casual approach to confidential information, which can lead to accidental breaches and erode client confidence in Sonae's ability to protect their data. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Sonae should adopt a framework of verify, authorize, and document when handling client information. Before any action that involves sharing or processing sensitive data, they must first verify the legitimacy and necessity of the action. Second, they must obtain explicit authorization from the appropriate authority or the client, as per Sonae's policies and regulatory requirements. Finally, all such actions and authorizations should be documented to provide an audit trail and demonstrate compliance. This systematic approach minimizes the risk of regulatory noncompliance and ethical breaches. Question 10. The review process indicates that a Sonae employee has inadvertently overheard a confidential discussion about an upcoming, significant product recall that is not yet public knowledge and could materially impact Sonae's stock price. The employee is considering whether to sell their personal Sonae shares before the news breaks. Which of the following actions best demonstrates adherence to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct for an employee of Sonae? Option A. Wait for the product recall to be officially announced and then sell shares, arguing that the information was not acted upon before the public announcement. Option B. Discuss the overheard information with trusted colleagues to gauge their opinions on the potential market impact before making any trading decisions. Option C. Immediately report the overheard information to Sonae's compliance department and refrain from any personal trading until the information is made public or officially cleared for trading. Option D. Proceed with selling personal Sonae shares, assuming that individual trading based on non-public information is permissible as long as it is not directly shared with others. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the overheard information to Sonae's compliance department and refrain from any personal trading until the information is made public or officially cleared for trading. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual at Sonae to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure adherence to internal policies and external regulations designed to maintain market integrity and prevent insider dealing. The pressure to act quickly on potentially lucrative information must be balanced against the strict legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the information through the designated internal channels at Sonae, such as the compliance department or a designated manager, and refraining from any personal trading based on the non-public information. This aligns with Sonae's regulatory obligations to prevent insider trading and maintain a fair and orderly market. By reporting, the individual initiates the formal process for assessing the information's materiality and determining appropriate actions, thereby upholding their duty of confidentiality and preventing potential market abuse. This adheres to principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance, ensuring that Sonae operates with integrity. An incorrect approach would be to discuss the information with colleagues outside of the official reporting structure. This action could inadvertently spread the non-public information, increasing the risk of insider dealing by others and creating a wider compliance breach for Sonae. It bypasses the established controls designed to manage sensitive information. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed with personal trading based on the information before it has been officially assessed and disseminated. This constitutes a direct violation of insider trading regulations, as it involves trading on material non-public information. Such an action would expose both the individual and Sonae to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of trust from investors and regulators. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of Sonae's internal policies on information handling and trading, as well as a thorough knowledge of relevant insider trading laws. When faced with potentially market-sensitive, non-public information, the immediate and primary action should always be to report it through the established compliance channels. This ensures that the information is handled appropriately, investigated by the relevant parties, and that any potential trading is conducted only after the information is public or deemed immaterial, thereby safeguarding both personal and corporate integrity. Question 11. What factors determine the appropriate timing and method for Sonae to disclose material non-public information to the market to ensure regulatory compliance and maintain market integrity? Option A. The need to provide timely updates to Sonae's investor relations team and key stakeholders before a public announcement. Option B. The requirement to simultaneously disseminate material information to all market participants through official channels, following internal verification procedures. Option C. The discretion of the Sonae CEO to release information to select financial analysts based on their perceived importance to Sonae's stock performance. Option D. The urgency of the information, allowing for immediate release to the market without prior internal review if deemed significant by the communications department. Correct answer is A. The need to provide timely updates to Sonae's investor relations team and key stakeholders before a public announcement. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because Sonae, as a publicly listed company, operates under strict regulatory scrutiny regarding its financial reporting and disclosure obligations. Ensuring compliance with these regulations is paramount to maintaining investor confidence and avoiding legal repercussions. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need for timely and accurate information dissemination with the potential for market manipulation or insider trading if information is released prematurely or selectively. Careful judgment is required to navigate the nuances of regulatory requirements and ethical considerations. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of Sonae's internal policies on information disclosure, which are designed to align with relevant regulatory frameworks. This approach prioritizes the establishment of clear communication channels and verification processes to ensure that all material information is disclosed simultaneously to the market, thereby preventing any perception of unfair advantage. This adheres to the principles of transparency and market integrity mandated by regulatory bodies, ensuring that all stakeholders receive information on an equal footing. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed of disclosure without adequate verification risks disseminating incomplete or inaccurate information, leading to potential market confusion and regulatory sanctions. This fails to uphold the duty of care owed to investors and the market. Another incorrect approach that involves selective disclosure to certain analysts or investors before a public announcement constitutes a clear breach of insider trading regulations and market abuse rules, as it grants an unfair informational advantage. Finally, an approach that delays disclosure unnecessarily, even if accurate, could be seen as withholding material information, potentially misleading the market about Sonae's true performance or prospects, and thus violating disclosure obligations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant regulatory obligations and internal policies. This should be followed by a risk assessment of potential disclosure scenarios, considering the impact on market integrity and investor fairness. The chosen approach must then be vetted against these identified risks and obligations, ensuring that it promotes transparency, accuracy, and equal access to material information for all market participants. Question 12. Compliance review shows that Sonae is considering implementing a new automated system for initial candidate screening. This system is designed to significantly speed up the review of applications. However, the project team has not yet formally consulted with Sonae's compliance department regarding the system's algorithms and data handling procedures, believing that existing data privacy protocols are sufficient. What is the most appropriate next step for Sonae to ensure adherence to the Sonae Hiring Assessment Test's regulatory framework? Option A. Immediately proceed with the implementation of the new automated screening system, assuming existing data privacy protocols are adequate. Option B. Implement the new system and rely on the legal team to address any potential compliance issues that may arise after deployment. Option C. Halt the implementation of the new automated screening system and initiate a formal review process with the compliance department to assess its adherence to all relevant regulations. Option D. Proceed with the implementation, but instruct the IT department to conduct a post-implementation audit of the system's compliance. Correct answer is A. Immediately proceed with the implementation of the new automated screening system, assuming existing data privacy protocols are adequate. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires Sonae employees to navigate the complexities of implementing new internal policies while ensuring strict adherence to the Sonae hiring assessment tests regulatory framework. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient internal process improvement with the imperative of maintaining compliance, especially when the proposed changes might inadvertently create new compliance risks or fail to adequately address existing ones. Careful judgment is required to identify potential conflicts between operational efficiency and regulatory obligations. The correct approach involves a proactive and collaborative engagement with the compliance department. This ensures that any proposed implementation of new internal policies is thoroughly vetted against the Sonae hiring assessment tests regulatory framework before being rolled out. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes regulatory adherence, a fundamental ethical and legal obligation for Sonae. By involving compliance early, potential breaches are identified and mitigated before they occur, safeguarding the company from penalties, reputational damage, and legal repercussions. This aligns with the principle of embedding compliance into business operations, an incorrect approach that bypasses or delays consultation with the compliance department is professionally unacceptable. This failure to engage with compliance represents a significant regulatory and ethical lapse. It demonstrates a disregard for the established framework designed to ensure Sonae operates legally and ethically. Such an approach increases the likelihood of unintentional noncompliance, which can lead to severe consequences, including fines and sanctions, and undermines the integrity of Sonae's hiring processes. Another incorrect approach, which is to assume that existing compliance measures are sufficient without a specific review for the new policy, is also professionally flawed. This assumption can lead to a false sense of security and overlooks the possibility that new operational changes may introduce novel compliance risks or render existing controls ineffective. It fails to uphold the duty of due diligence and proactive risk management expected of Sonae employees. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the Sonae hiring assessment tests regulatory requirements. When considering any new operational implementation, the first step should always be to identify potential impacts on compliance. This should be followed by a formal consultation with the relevant compliance personnel, providing them with all necessary details of the proposed changes. The decision to proceed should only be made after receiving clearance or incorporating necessary adjustments based on the compliance department's guidance. This systematic approach ensures that operational goals are pursued responsibly and within the bounds of the regulatory framework. Question 13. Risk assessment procedures indicate that Sonae is considering the implementation of a new customer relationship management (CRM) system designed to enhance client engagement and streamline internal processes. However, the system will process a significant volume of sensitive client personal data. Which of the following approaches best ensures Sonae's compliance with data protection regulations during this implementation? Option A. Implement the CRM system with minimal initial data fields, relying on future system updates to add necessary data protection features as they become available. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment (DPIA) before deployment, ensuring the system's design incorporates data minimization principles and robust security measures, and establishing clear data governance policies. Option C. Focus on maximizing the data collected by the CRM to gain the deepest possible client insights, assuming that advanced analytics will inherently protect the data. Option D. Prioritize rapid deployment of the CRM system to gain immediate competitive advantages, with data protection reviews conducted post-implementation. The correct answer is D. Prioritize rapid deployment of the CRM system to gain immediate competitive advantages, with data protection reviews conducted post-implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Sonae, as a financial services firm, operates within a highly regulated environment. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficient data processing and client service with the stringent requirements for data privacy and security mandated by relevant regulations. A hasty or incomplete approach to implementing new technology can lead to significant compliance breaches, reputational damage, and financial penalties. Careful judgment is required to ensure that technological advancements do not inadvertently compromise client trust or regulatory obligations. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multifaceted strategy that prioritizes regulatory compliance from the outset. This includes conducting a thorough data protection impact assessment, DPIA, before implementation, ensuring that all data processing activities are lawful, fair, and transparent, and that appropriate technical and organizational measures are in place to safeguard personal data. This approach aligns with the principles of data minimization, purpose limitation, and accountability, which are fundamental to data protection legislation. By proactively identifying and mitigating risks, Sonae can ensure that its technological upgrades are not only efficient, but also fully compliant, thereby upholding its ethical and legal responsibilities to its clients and regulators. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the speed of implementation without a prior DPIA would fail to identify potential risks to data privacy and security. This oversight could lead to noncompliance with data protection laws, such as inadequate consent mechanisms or insufficient security measures, exposing Sonae to regulatory action and client complaints. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the perceived benefits of the new technology over data minimization would involve collecting and processing more personal data than is strictly necessary for the stated purposes. This violates the principle of data minimization and increases the risk of data breaches and misuse, as more data is exposed to potential vulnerabilities. A third incorrect approach that neglects to establish clear data governance policies for the new system would create ambiguity regarding data ownership, access controls, and retention periods. This lack of clarity can lead to unauthorized access, data leakage, and difficulties in responding to data subject requests, all of which are significant regulatory failures. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape. Before any new technology is implemented, a risk assessment, including a DPIA, should be conducted. This should be followed by a clear articulation of the legal basis for processing, the implementation of robust security measures, and the establishment of comprehensive data governance policies. Continuous monitoring and review are also essential to ensure ongoing compliance. Question 14. Compliance review shows that Sonae's internal process for evaluating and disclosing potential material information to the market is largely informal, relying on ad hoc discussions among senior executives. This has led to concerns about the consistency and timeliness of disclosures. Which of the following represents the most appropriate approach for Sonae to address this compliance gap? Option A. Continue with the current informal discussion-based approach, but increase the frequency of these discussions to ensure all potential material information is covered. Option B. Instruct all employees to report any potential material information directly to the CEO's office for individual assessment without a standardized process. Option C. Develop and implement a formal documented policy outlining the criteria for identifying material information, the assessment process, approval workflows, and the designated channels for timely and fair market disclosure, ensuring alignment with relevant Portuguese and EU securities regulations. Option D. Wait for definitive confirmation of all aspects of a potential material event before initiating any internal discussions or external disclosure procedures. The correct answer is C. Develop and implement a formal documented policy outlining the criteria for identifying material information, the assessment process, approval workflows, and the designated channels for timely and fair market disclosure, ensuring alignment with relevant Portuguese and EU securities regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Sonae, as a publicly listed company, must adhere to stringent regulatory requirements regarding the disclosure of material information. The challenge lies in balancing the need for timely communication with shareholders and the market against the risk of premature or incomplete disclosure, which could lead to market manipulation or misinterpretation. The compliance review highlights a potential gap in Sonae's internal processes for managing sensitive information. The correct approach involves establishing a clear, documented policy for handling potential material information, including a defined process for assessment, approval, and dissemination. This policy should align with Sonae's regulatory obligations, likely under Portuguese securities law and relevant EU directives, ensuring that any information that could reasonably affect the share price is disclosed in a fair and transparent manner. This systematic approach minimizes the risk of accidental leaks, insider trading, and regulatory sanctions, thereby protecting Sonae's reputation and market integrity. An incorrect approach of relying on informal communication channels for assessing the materiality of information is professionally unacceptable. This method lacks accountability, auditability, and consistency, increasing the likelihood of subjective judgment errors and potential breaches of disclosure rules. It also creates a fertile ground for information asymmetry and insider trading, as not all relevant parties may be privy to the informal discussions. Another incorrect approach of delaying disclosure until absolute certainty is achieved, even when preliminary information strongly suggests a material event, is also problematic. While certainty is desirable, regulatory frameworks often require disclosure of material information as soon as it is known, even if it is still subject to final confirmation, provided it is communicated with appropriate caveats. Excessive delay can be interpreted as an attempt to manipulate the market or gain an unfair advantage. Finally, an incorrect approach of disclosing information only to a select group of senior management without a clear dissemination plan for the broader market is a direct violation of fair disclosure principles. This practice can lead to insider trading and market manipulation, as those with privileged access can act on the information before it is made public, disadvantaging other investors. Professionals should adopt a proactive and structured decision-making process. This involves understanding the relevant regulatory framework, identifying potential material information early, establishing clear internal protocols for assessment and disclosure, and ensuring consistent application of these protocols. Regular training and communication of these policies to all relevant personnel are crucial. When in doubt, seeking guidance from legal and compliance departments is paramount. Question 15. The assessment process reveals that a candidate for a position at Sonae has submitted all required documentation, with the exception of a single, non-critical reference contact. The hiring manager is under pressure to fill the role quickly. What is the most appropriate course of action for the assessor? Option A. Contact the candidate to request the missing reference contact information before proceeding with the assessment. Option B. Proceed with the assessment and assume the candidate has provided satisfactory references, as the omission is minor. Option C. Proceed with the assessment, noting the missing reference contact as a minor omission to be followed up on post-hiring. Option D. Immediately disqualify the candidate due to the incomplete submission, as per Sonae's strict documentation requirements. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the assessment, noting the missing reference contact as a minor omission to be followed up on post-hiring. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient onboarding with the absolute priority of adhering to Sonae's regulatory framework and internal guidelines for hiring. Misinterpreting or overlooking specific requirements can lead to compliance breaches, reputational damage, and potential legal repercussions for Sonae. Careful judgment is essential to ensure all candidates are assessed fairly and in accordance with established procedures. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the candidate's submitted documentation against the explicit requirements outlined in Sonae's hiring assessment test guidelines. This includes verifying the completeness and accuracy of all information provided, ensuring it aligns with the role's prerequisites and any specific certifications or qualifications mandated by Sonae's internal policies. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core purpose of the assessment: to evaluate a candidate's suitability based on predefined, compliant criteria. Adhering strictly to these guidelines demonstrates professional integrity and upholds Sonae's commitment to a fair and regulated hiring process. An incorrect approach that overlooks a minor discrepancy in a submitted document, assuming it is inconsequential, fails to uphold the principle of due diligence. Regulatory frameworks, even for internal hiring processes, often stipulate that all submitted information must be verified. This oversight could lead to the incorrect assessment of a candidate's qualifications, potentially placing an unqualified individual in a role or unfairly disadvantaging a qualified one. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the assessment without confirming a specific, mandatory certification mentioned in the guidelines, represents a direct contravention of Sonae's established procedures. This failure to verify a critical requirement could result in a candidate being advanced who does not meet a fundamental qualification, thereby compromising the integrity of the hiring process and potentially exposing Sonae to risks associated with employing individuals who do not meet necessary standards. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a systematic checklist approach. First, identify all explicit requirements and guidelines provided by Sonae for the hiring assessment. Second, meticulously compare the candidate's submission against each of these requirements. Third, if any discrepancy or missing information is identified, consult the relevant Sonae policy or escalate to a supervisor for clarification before proceeding. The guiding principle should always be to prioritize compliance with Sonae's established regulatory and procedural framework. Question 16. Market research demonstrates that a new competitor is aggressively promoting a loyalty program with incentives that appear to offer significantly higher rewards than Sonae's current program. Sonae's marketing team is eager to launch a counter-promotion to regain market share, proposing to highlight a limited-time, enhanced reward structure that is complex and has several undisclosed conditions. The legal department has raised concerns about the clarity and potential for misinterpretation of these undisclosed conditions in the proposed promotional materials. Given the absolute priority of adhering to the regulatory framework for hiring assessment tests, which of the following approaches should Sonae adopt? Option A. Delay the counter-promotion until the legal department can conduct a thorough review of all proposed marketing materials, ensuring all terms and conditions are clearly and accurately presented to consumers, even if it means missing the immediate competitive window. Option B. Launch the promotion immediately, assuming that the competitor's practices are likely similar and that consumers will understand the complexity of the reward structure. Option C. Proceed with the enhanced reward promotion as proposed, focusing on the competitive advantage and the urgency of the market response, with a brief disclaimer at the bottom of the advertisement. Option D. Implement a simplified version of the enhanced reward promotion that is less attractive but easier to understand, even if it does not fully match the competitor's perceived offer. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the enhanced reward promotion as proposed, focusing on the competitive advantage and the urgency of the market response, with a brief disclaimer at the bottom of the advertisement. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to expand its market presence and the stringent regulatory requirements designed to protect consumers and ensure fair competition. Sonae, as a large retail entity, must navigate these complexities with utmost diligence. The core of the challenge lies in balancing aggressive business growth strategies with the absolute priority of adhering to the regulatory framework governing its operations, specifically concerning advertising and consumer information. The correct approach involves a meticulous review of all marketing materials by the legal and compliance departments to ensure they align precisely with Sonae's published terms and conditions and all relevant advertising standards. This proactive stance is crucial because it directly addresses the regulatory obligation to provide clear, accurate, and non-misleading information to consumers. By ensuring that promotional offers are fully compliant and transparent, Sonae mitigates the risk of regulatory sanctions, reputational damage, and potential legal challenges. This approach prioritizes consumer trust and adherence to the law above short-term marketing gains. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the potential for increased sales without a thorough compliance check fails to acknowledge the regulatory framework's absolute priority. This oversight can lead to misleading advertising, which is a direct violation of consumer protection laws. Such a failure could result in significant fines, mandatory corrective advertising campaigns, and a loss of consumer confidence, all of which would ultimately harm Sonae's long-term business objectives. Another incorrect approach that relies on the assumption that competitors engage in similar practices is also professionally unacceptable. Regulatory compliance is not dependent on the actions of others. It is an independent obligation. Basing compliance decisions on perceived industry norms rather than on the explicit requirements of the law demonstrates a disregard for Sonae's legal responsibilities and exposes the company to significant risk. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed to market over regulatory scrutiny is equally flawed. While market responsiveness is important, it cannot supersede the fundamental requirement to comply with laws and regulations. Rushing promotional campaigns without adequate legal review increases the likelihood of errors and omissions that could lead to regulatory breaches. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear hierarchy of priorities, with regulatory compliance at the absolute apex. Before any marketing campaign is launched, a comprehensive review process involving legal and compliance teams must be embedded. This process should include a risk assessment to identify potential areas of noncompliance and a clear sign-off procedure. When in doubt, seeking clarification from regulatory bodies or legal counsel is essential. The ultimate goal is to ensure that all business activities, including marketing, are conducted ethically and in full accordance with the law, thereby safeguarding the company's reputation and long-term sustainability. Question 17. Compliance review shows that Sonae's new candidate onboarding system, recently developed internally, may not fully align with the data handling and privacy protocols stipulated by the Sonae hiring assessment test. What is the most appropriate course of action for Sonae's HR and IT departments to ensure regulatory adherence before the system's full integration into the hiring process? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive audit of the new system's data processing logic and user access controls against the Sonae hiring assessment test's specific data privacy and security requirements, followed by necessary modifications and retesting before full deployment. Option B. Immediately deploy the new onboarding system to all hiring managers, with a plan to address any compliance issues that may arise after its implementation. Option C. Proceed with the full integration of the new system, relying on the assumption that internal development inherently meets the standards of the Sonae hiring assessment test. Option D. Update the user interface of the new onboarding system to reflect best practices, assuming the underlying data processing mechanisms are already compliant with the Sonae hiring assessment test. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive audit of the new system's data processing logic and user access controls against the Sonae hiring assessment test's specific data privacy and security requirements, followed by necessary modifications and retesting before full deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires Sonae employees to navigate the complexities of implementing new internal policies while ensuring strict adherence to the Sonae hiring assessment test's regulatory framework. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient onboarding with the imperative to uphold compliance standards, particularly concerning data privacy and fair hiring practices as dictated by the test's guidelines. Careful judgment is required to avoid shortcuts that could lead to regulatory breaches or reputational damage. The correct approach involves a phased implementation of the new onboarding system, prioritizing a thorough review and validation of all data handling procedures against the Sonae hiring assessment test's specific requirements before full deployment. This ensures that Sonae's practices remain compliant with the test's stipulated data privacy and security protocols. This approach is professionally sound because it directly addresses the core of the compliance review's findings by proactively mitigating risks associated with data handling and ensuring that the new system aligns with the established regulatory framework. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible data management and adherence to the principles embedded within the Sonae hiring assessment test. An incorrect approach that involves immediately rolling out the new system without a dedicated compliance check fails to address the identified issues. This creates a significant regulatory risk, as the system may inadvertently violate data privacy or fair hiring guidelines outlined in the Sonae hiring assessment test. Another incorrect approach, which is to only update the system's user interface while leaving the underlying data processing logic unchanged, is also problematic. This overlooks the possibility that the compliance review identified issues within the data processing itself, not just its presentation. This approach risks perpetuating or even exacerbating existing compliance gaps. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thoroughness, by assuming the new system is compliant without verification, demonstrates a disregard for the Sonae hiring assessment test's regulatory demands and a lack of due diligence, potentially leading to severe compliance failures. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the identified compliance issues. This involves dissecting the findings of the compliance review to pinpoint the exact areas of concern. Subsequently, they should consult the relevant sections of the Sonae Hiring Assessment Test regulatory framework to understand the specific requirements and prohibitions. The next step is to brainstorm and evaluate potential implementation strategies, assessing each against the regulatory requirements and the identified risks. The chosen approach should demonstrably mitigate these risks and ensure full compliance, even if it requires a more measured pace. Continuous monitoring and post-implementation audits are also crucial to maintain ongoing compliance. Question 18. Compliance review shows that Sonae is preparing to launch a new line of sustainable home goods. The marketing department has drafted promotional materials highlighting the environmental benefits of these products, but they are eager to expedite the launch to capitalize on current consumer interest. The head of marketing has requested that the compliance department expedite their review process, suggesting that the materials are largely similar to those used for previous product launches and should therefore be approved quickly. What is the most appropriate course of action for Sonae's compliance department in this situation? Option A. Expedite the review process by approving the marketing materials based on the marketing department's assurance that they are similar to previously approved materials, assuming no significant changes in regulatory requirements. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the new marketing materials, verifying all environmental claims against relevant Sonae policies and applicable regulatory guidelines for environmental marketing, regardless of the urgency. Option C. Rely on the marketing team's internal assessment of compliance, as they are most familiar with the product and its intended messaging, and only conduct a cursory check of the materials. Option D. Prioritize the launch timeline by approving the marketing materials immediately and scheduling a post-launch review to address any potential compliance issues that may arise. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the new marketing materials, verifying all environmental claims against relevant Sonae policies and applicable regulatory guidelines for environmental marketing, regardless of the urgency. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a business objective, launching a new product quickly, and regulatory compliance requirements. The pressure to meet market demand can lead to shortcuts that compromise adherence to established procedures and legal obligations. Careful judgment is required to balance speed with the imperative of regulatory adherence, ensuring that Sonae's operations remain within legal boundaries and uphold ethical standards. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented review of the new product's marketing materials against Sonae's internal compliance policies and relevant regulatory guidelines. This ensures that all claims are substantiated, accurate, and do not mislead consumers. Specifically, this approach aligns with the principles of consumer protection and fair advertising practices mandated by regulatory frameworks. It demonstrates a commitment to transparency and responsible business conduct, which are foundational to maintaining trust with customers and regulatory bodies. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over due diligence would involve launching the product without a comprehensive compliance check. This failure to verify marketing claims against regulatory standards creates a significant risk of misleading advertising, which can result in regulatory sanctions, fines, and reputational damage for Sonae. Another incorrect approach, relying solely on the marketing team's self-assessment without independent verification, is also problematic. This bypasses the established control mechanisms designed to ensure compliance and introduces a conflict of interest, as the marketing team may be biased towards approving materials that support sales objectives, potentially overlooking regulatory nuances. A third incorrect approach, assuming that because similar products have been launched previously, the new materials will automatically be compliant, ignores the possibility of evolving regulations or unique aspects of the new product that require specific scrutiny. This assumption can lead to overlooking new compliance obligations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a risk-based approach to compliance. This involves identifying potential regulatory pitfalls early in the product development lifecycle, establishing clear internal review processes with defined responsibilities, and ensuring adequate training for all personnel involved in product marketing. When faced with time pressures, the framework should guide professionals to escalate concerns and seek clarification from compliance or legal departments rather than proceeding with unverified materials. The ultimate goal is to integrate compliance seamlessly into business operations, rather than treating it as an afterthought. Question 19. Stakeholder feedback indicates a potential discrepancy in how Sonae recognizes revenue for certain long-term service contracts. Management is concerned about the perception of inconsistency and wants to address this promptly. Which of the following represents the most appropriate initial approach for Sonae? Option A. Issue a public statement reassuring stakeholders that Sonae's financial reporting is robust and that no changes are currently warranted, pending further internal review. Option B. Focus on enhancing marketing materials to better explain Sonae's current revenue recognition practices without altering the practices themselves. Option C. Immediately adjust the revenue recognition for all similar contracts to align with the specific examples raised by stakeholders to avoid further negative feedback. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the revenue recognition policies for these contracts against the relevant accounting standards and Sonae's existing disclosures, and if necessary, propose adjustments with appropriate disclosure. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the revenue recognition policies for these contracts against the relevant accounting standards and Sonae's existing disclosures, and if necessary, propose adjustments with appropriate disclosure. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Sonae, as a publicly listed company, operates under strict regulatory scrutiny regarding its financial reporting and disclosure obligations. The challenge lies in balancing the need to respond to stakeholder concerns with the imperative to adhere to established accounting principles and disclosure requirements. Misinterpreting or misapplying these principles can lead to inaccurate financial statements, regulatory penalties, and damage to Sonae's reputation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any communication or action taken is both transparent and compliant. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the relevant accounting standards and Sonae's existing disclosures. This ensures that any adjustments or clarifications are made in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, or International Financial Reporting Standards, IFRS, depending on Sonae's reporting jurisdiction. Specifically, if the feedback relates to revenue recognition, the company must consult the applicable standards, e.g., IFRS 15, to determine if current practices align with the principles of recognizing revenue when control of goods or services is transferred to the customer. Any necessary adjustments must be properly documented and reflected in the financial statements, with clear and comprehensive disclosures explaining the nature of the change and its impact. This adherence to accounting standards and transparent disclosure is mandated by regulatory bodies overseeing financial markets and is crucial for maintaining investor confidence. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement changes based solely on stakeholder sentiment, without a rigorous accounting review. This could lead to noncompliance with accounting standards, potentially resulting in restatements and regulatory sanctions. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the feedback without proper investigation, which could be seen as a failure to engage with stakeholders and address legitimate concerns, potentially leading to reputational damage and a loss of trust. Furthermore, providing selective or misleading information to stakeholders, even if intended to appease them, constitutes a breach of disclosure obligations and ethical conduct, as it undermines the principle of transparency essential for fair and efficient markets. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the nature of the stakeholder feedback. This involves gathering all relevant information and identifying the specific areas of concern. The next step is to consult the applicable regulatory framework and accounting standards to assess the validity of the feedback and determine the appropriate course of action. This assessment should involve internal accounting and legal teams. If a discrepancy or issue is identified, the company must then develop a plan for remediation that is compliant with all regulations and ethical guidelines. Communication with stakeholders should be clear, accurate, and timely, reflecting the actions taken and the rationale behind them. Question 20. Strategic planning requires Sonae to consider how its expansion into new international markets might create conflicts of interest for its employees. Which of the following approaches best addresses this challenge while adhering to regulatory expectations? Option A. Delegating the responsibility for managing conflicts of interest to the newly appointed country managers in each expansion territory without providing specific guidance or oversight. Option B. Focusing solely on securing market share in new territories, assuming that existing internal policies will adequately cover any emerging conflicts of interest. Option C. Adopting a reactive approach, addressing conflicts of interest only when they are reported or discovered, to minimize upfront investment in compliance infrastructure. Option D. Implementing a comprehensive training program for all employees on identifying and reporting potential conflicts of interest, coupled with clear internal policies and regular audits to ensure compliance. The correct answer is D. Implementing a comprehensive training program for all employees on identifying and reporting potential conflicts of interest, coupled with clear internal policies and regular audits to ensure compliance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between achieving business objectives and adhering to regulatory compliance, particularly within the context of Sonae's operational environment. The need to balance profitability with ethical conduct and legal obligations requires careful judgment. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and mitigating potential conflicts of interest that could arise from Sonae's expansion into new markets. This is crucial because regulatory frameworks, such as those governing financial services or consumer protection, often mandate strict rules around disclosure, fair dealing, and the avoidance of situations where personal interests could improperly influence professional decisions. By establishing clear internal policies and training programs, Sonae demonstrates a commitment to upholding these standards, thereby preventing potential breaches and safeguarding its reputation. This proactive stance aligns with the principle of treating customers fairly and ensures that Sonae's business practices remain within the bounds of legal and ethical conduct. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate market share gains without adequate consideration for regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to violations of consumer protection laws, data privacy regulations, or anti-competition statutes, resulting in significant fines, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach, which involves delegating compliance responsibilities solely to junior staff without senior oversight, fails to instill a culture of compliance throughout the organization. This can result in oversight, misinterpretation of regulations, and ultimately non-compliance, as junior staff may lack the experience or authority to effectively manage complex regulatory challenges. Finally, an approach that focuses only on meeting minimum legal requirements without considering broader ethical implications or industry best practices can leave Sonae vulnerable to future regulatory changes or public scrutiny, undermining its long-term sustainability. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory landscape applicable to Sonae's operations. This involves identifying potential risks and conflicts of interest early in the strategic planning process. Subsequently, they should evaluate different approaches based on their alignment with regulatory mandates, ethical principles, and the company's stated values. The chosen approach should prioritize robust compliance mechanisms, clear lines of accountability, and continuous monitoring to ensure adherence to evolving regulations and best practices.